Hey guys, so this is a document from the Department of the Army, U.S. Army Operational Group, U.S. Army Intelligence and Security Command, Fort Meade, Maryland, from June 9th, 1983. And the subject is Analysis and Assessment of Gateway Process, which is Robert Monroe's Gateway Process. And I'm just going to read the entire document because it's interesting on a number of levels. And the writer here is Wayne M. McDonnell, Lieutenant Commander, and I don't really know what the rest of these designations are, but I'm pretty sure that's what LTC is. So this is a pretty high up guy in the Army. But I have skimmed this, but I haven't read it in its entirety, so I'm going to actually read it in its entirety and then just add my own 2 cents where something strikes me in real time. The Gateway Experience, Brain Hemisphere Synchronization in Perspective. Introduction. Oops. In order to describe the Monroe Institute technique for achieving altered states of consciousness, the Gateway Experience, involving brain hemisphere synchronization or Hemi-Sync, the most effective way to begin is to briefly profile the basic mechanics which underlay operation of related methods such as hypnosis, transcendental meditation, and biofeedback. It is easiest to effectively describe what Gateway is by beginning with a short description of those associated techniques that share some common aspects with the Gateway experience, but which are nevertheless different. In this way, we can develop a frame of reference at the outset which will provide useful concepts to explain and understand Gateway by comparison as we proceed. Hypnosis. According to the theories of psychologist Ronald Stone and the biomedical engineering models of Itchak Bentov, hypnosis is basically a technique which permits acquisition of direct access to the sensory motor cortex and pleasure centers and lower cerebral emotional portions and associated pleasure centers of the right side of the human brain following successful disengagement of the stimulus screening function of the left hemisphere of the brain. Now, this lieutenant commander could use some more commas in his writing here. I'm out of breath after that first sentence. Just first of all. Now, moving on. The left hemisphere of the brain is the self-cognitive, verbal, and linear reasoning component of the mind. It fulfills the function of screening incoming stimuli by categorizing, assessing, and assigning meaning prior to allowing passage to the right hemisphere of the mind. The right hemisphere, which functions as the non-critical, holistic, nonverbal, and pattern-oriented component of the brain, appears to accept what the left hemisphere passes to it without question. Consequently, if the left hemisphere can be distracted either through boredom or through reduction to a soporific semi-sleep state, external stimuli to include hypnotic suggestions are allowed to pass unchallenged into the right hemisphere, where they are accepted and acted upon directly. The result may involve an emotional reaction originating in the lower cerebral region, sensory motor responses requiring involvement of the cortex, and so on. Both the sensory and the motor cortices of the right cerebral portion of the brain contain a sequence of points known as the homunculus. I don't think I pronounced that right, which corresponds to points in the body. See Exhibit 1, next page. Stimulation of the corresponding area on the cortex causes intermediate response in the associated portion of the body. Consequently, induction of the suggestion that the left leg is numb, if it reaches the right hemisphere unchallenged and is referred to the appropriate area of the sensory cortex, will result in an electrical reaction being generated that will induce the feeling of numbness. Similarly, the suggestion that the person is experiencing a general feeling of happiness and well-being would be referred to the appropriate pleasure centers located in the lower cerebral portion or in the cortex of the right hemisphere, thereby inducing the suggested feeling of euphoria. Finally, suggestions such as one that informs the hypnotic subject that he enjoys enhanced concentration or powers of memory would be responded to in the right hemisphere by accessing unused information storage capacity normally held in reserve as a result of left hemisphere selection and control processes. This aspect will become significant in the context of the gateway process when attention is given to examining the way that hypnosis may be used to accelerate progress in the early stages of the gateway experience. Transcendental meditation. On the other hand, transcendental meditation works in a distinctly different fashion from hypnosis, that is. In this technique, well, that's arguable, but anyway. In this technique, intense and protracted single-minded concentration on the process of drawing energy up the spinal cord ultimately results in what appears to be creation of acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles, which are then conducted to the gray matter in the cerebral cortex on the right side of the brain. As a result, according to Bentov, these waves will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homunculus, starting from the toes and on up. The Bentov biomedical model, as described in a book by Lee Sanella, MD, entitled Kundalini, Psychosis or Transcendence, that's a very interesting title, states that the standing acoustical waves are the result of the altered rhythm of heart sounds, which are occasioned by prolonged practice of meditation, and which set up sympathetic vibrations in the walls of the fluid-filled cavities, which comprise the third and lateral ventricles of the brain. In addition, according to Bentov, the states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a self-stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Bentov also notes that most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body, means that it is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. Although normally a period of meditation involving intense concentration and practice for 5 years or some is required to bring up the Kundalini, Bentov states that exposure to mechanical or acoustical vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz cycles per second for protracted periods may achieve the same effect. Bentov cites as an example repeated riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibrations, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. He also notes that the cumulative effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system. Biofeedback. The third consciousness-altering methodology, which will be briefly described, is biofeedback. Biofeedback is somewhat unique in that it actually employs the self-cognitive powers of the left hemisphere to gain access to such areas of the right brain as the lower cerebral, motor, and sensory cortices and assorted pain or pleasure centers. Instead of suppressing the left hemisphere as is done in hypnosis, or largely bypassing and ignoring it as is done in transcendental meditation, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of successful right hemisphere access to the specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure, or other areas in the manner needed to produce the desired result. Special self-monitoring devices such as the digital thermometer are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. Once this is done, the left brain can then repeatedly instruct the right brain to re-establish the pathways involved so as to produce the same external, objective measures of success. In this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to such an extent that left brain consciousness is enabled to access appropriate areas in the right brain using a conscious demand mode. For example, if the subject wishes to increase the circulation in the left leg, in order to speed up healing, he may concentrate with his left brain on achieving that result while carefully monitoring a digital thermometer connected to the left leg. When the concentrated effort begins to achieve success, the digital thermometer will register an increase in the temperature of the left leg. At that point, the subject can mentally, left brain, associate the sensations experienced with the result achieved and can begin to emphasize by memory recall the same process to cause its strengthening by affirmation and repetition. In this way, pain can be blocked, healing can be enhanced, malignant tumors can apparently be suppressed and ultimately destroyed, the body's pleasure centers can be stimulated, and a variety of specific physiological results may be achieved. In addition, biofeedback may be used to greatly accelerate achievement of deep meditative states, particularly for beginners who have no experience in meditative techniques and whose progress in that methodology is enhanced through effective visualization and external objective affirmation. Display of the subject's brainwave pattern on a cathode ray tube has proven to be a laboratory-validated means by which subjects may quickly learn to place themselves in a profoundly relaxed state characterized by the sort of quietude and singularity of mental focus associated with advanced meditation. Gateway and Hemi-Sync. Now that we have briefly profiled the basic mechanics of the principal techniques for altering or expanding consciousness, which share some of the objectives and/or methods employed in the gateway experience, we may proceed to focus on what that technique actually involves. Fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output between the left and right hemispheres so as to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical sphere so as to ultimately escape even the restrictions of time and space. The participant then gains access to the various levels of intuitive knowledge which the universe offers. What differentiates the gateway experience from forms of meditation is its use of the Hemi-Sync technique, which is defined in a monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Yeager as a state of consciousness defined when the EEG patterns of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal in amplitude and frequency. So this is discussing merging the left and right hemispheres into a singular resonance pattern. Although the Hemi-Sync seems to be rather rare and of only short duration in ordinary human consciousness, Melissa Yeager states that audio techniques developed by Bob Monroe can induce and sustain Hemi-Sync with the Institute's basic Focus 3 tapes. She also notes that studies conducted by Elmer and Alice Green at the Menninger Foundation have shown that a subject with 20 years of training in Zen meditation could consistently establish Hemi-Sync at will, sustaining it for over 15 minutes. Dr. Stuart Twemlow, a psychiatrist and a research associate of the Monroe Institute, reports that in our studies of the effect of the Monroe tape system on brainwaves, we have found that the tapes encourage the focusing of brain energy, it can be measured as with a light bulb in watts, into a narrower and narrower frequency band. This focusing of energy is not unlike the yoga concept of one-pointedness, which we may translate in Western terms as a single-mindedness. Dr. Twemlow goes on to observe that as the individual gets into the tapes beyond Focus 3, there is a gradual increase in brainwave size, which is a measure of brain energy or power. Lamp versus laser. Melissa Yeager uses a metaphor to help clarify the process involved in the use of Hemi-Sync in the gateway experience. She points out that the human mind in its natural state may be likened to an ordinary lamp, which expends energy in the form of both heat and light, but in a chaotic, incoherent way which diffuses its energy over a wide area of rather limited depth. On the other hand, the human mind under the discipline of Hemi-Sync acts after the fashion of a laser beam, which produces a disciplined stream of light. The stream of energy is projected with total coherence of both frequency and amplitude, such that the surface area of a laser beam contains billions of times the concentrated energy found in a similar surface area on the sun. Gateway assumes that once the frequency and amplitude of the human brain are rendered coherent, it is possible to begin accelerating both so that the human mind is soon resonating at at ever higher vibrational levels. The mind can then bring itself into synchronization with more sophisticated and rarefied energy levels in the universe. The mind, when operating at these increasingly rarefied levels, is assumed to be capable of processing the information thus received through the fundamental matrix by which it makes sense of ordinary physical sensory input to achieve meaning in a cognitive context. Such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, but may also be perceived as astonishing flashes of holistic intuition, or even in the form of scenarios involving both visual and aural perception. The mechanics by which the mind exercises the consciousness function will be addressed in more detail later in this paper. Frequency following response. To achieve synchronization of brain hemispheres, the Hemi-Sync technique takes advantage of a phenomenon known as the frequency following response, which means that if a subject hears a sound produced at a frequency which emulates one of those associated with the operation of the human brain, the brain will try to mimic the same frequency pattern by adjusting its brainwave output. Now, this is very interesting because this is what the television does, right? It subjects the brain to a frequency both visually and in sound as far as cycles per second and the way that your brain waves are oscillating. It forces your brain to mimic the same frequency pattern that's being emitted to it, and then this is what turns people that watch television into the proverbial vegetable on the couch, right? It is essentially hypnosis. It is all of the techniques that have been described so far. Hypnosis, biofeedback, transcendental meditation, all in this frequency following response. It's all of these techniques that these mind scientists have figured out actually work to bypass the left brain and your critical thinking capacity and allow that information to proceed directly into your right brain. And, the left brain, right brain, that's sort of artificial, structural distinctions being made about your holistic energy field in your brain. But since that's what this paper is using and it's coming at it from the scientific perspective, we'll go ahead and just pretend like it's, absolutely legitimate and factual. But, just keep that in the back of your mind as we continue reading here as far as how this technology is using all of what is being discussed here to control minds. And this goes even further into all of the electronic frequencies that are being pumped out by the cell towers and the Gwen towers, and even with all of the fear mongering that's going on about the 5G networks, obviously there is a lot of truth, as we'll see as we go further, into how these frequencies are affecting the human mind and thus our ability to process information and more importantly be connected to the Earth's frequency, which informs our own intuition and is by design supposed to inform it in a way that is holistic and based in a state of equilibrium. But okay, moving on. Therefore, if the subject is in a fully awake state but hears sound frequencies which approximates brainwave output at the theta level, the subject's brain will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta to the theta level. Since the theta level is associated with sleep, the subject concerned may progress from a fully awake to a sleep state, provided that he does not consciously resist, as the brain strives to entrain its wave frequency output with the one which the person hears. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, Hemi-Sync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. And it's so interesting how this relates to what I was talking about in one of the videos I recently put up about how you can deduce a lot of information from a person's voice, and it's playing on this. Now they're talking about, frequencies that are beyond our normal capacity. It's like the visible spectrum. Whenever you see those charts where there's, we see this tiny 5% percentage of the visible spectrum, and then 95% of the visible spectrum our eyes don't decode. And it's similar with sound vibrations, and that's what Robert Monroe's technique does. But still there's that underlying truth about how much information is encoded into sonic waveforms, like the ones that are coming at you right now as I speak through this microphone. Since these brainwave frequencies are outside the spectrum of sounds which can be heard in pure form by the human ear, Hemi-Sync must produce them based on another phenomenon known as the brain's capacity for deducing beat frequencies. If the human brain is exposed to one frequency in the left ear, which is 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them, the beat frequency, thus availing itself of the FFR phenomenon and using the technique of beat frequencies. The gateway system uses Hemi-Sync and other audio techniques employing the FFR phenomenon to introduce a variety of frequencies which are played at a virtually subliminal, marginally audible level. So that's really interesting also, that this Hemi-Sync technique for getting out of body and astral projection is subconscious subliminal manipulation. It's not something that can be naturally achieved as far as this technique goes, right? Now, of course, going back to the original modalities that this is based on, transcendental meditation, biofeedback, hypnosis, there are people that meditate for many, many, many years, that can develop these abilities in a quote-unquote natural way. But I hope you see the parallel as we go on, that these people are essentially doing the same thing in these meditative states. They are self-hypnotizing themselves into a result that the Monroe Institute is achieving through artificial means. It's basically like a hack to that process, right? And then that brings into question just how legitimate these structural self-hypnosis, quote-unquote ancient wisdom methodologies are, as far as, being spiritual goes or enlightenment goes. The objective is to relax the left hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body in a virtual sleep state, and bring the left and right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote the production of ever higher amplitude and frequency of brainwave output. Audible and perhaps subliminal suggestions by Bob Monroe accompany the various brainwave frequencies, which are sometimes rolled in together with other sounds such as sea, surf, to mask the sound frequencies where desirable. In this way, Gateway endeavors to provide the subject with the tools by which he may alter his consciousness based on his own volition over time through the repetitive use of the tapes, so as to access via intuitive means new categories of information not available to ordinary consciousness. Role of resonance. However, brain coherence through entrainment to beat frequencies introduced via stereo headphones is only part of the reason why the gateway system works. I mean, that sentence right there is describing the television and the internet and YouTube and how it works, okay? It is entraining your brain to beat frequencies, right? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Excuse me. It is also designed to achieve the physical quietude characteristic of deep, transcendental meditative states, which brings about a complete alteration of the fundamental resonance pattern associated with the sound frequencies produced by the human body. Yoga, Zen, or transcendental meditation, if practiced long enough, will produce a change in the sound frequency with which the human heart resonates throughout the entire body. According to Bentoff, this change in resonance results from elimination of what the medical profession calls the bifurcation echo, so that the sound of the heartbeat can move synchronously up and down the circulatory system in harmonious resonance approximately 7 times a second. Bentoff describes the role played by the bifurcation echo as follows. When the left ventricle of the heart ejects blood, the aorta, being elastic, balloons out just beyond the valve and causes a pressure pulse to travel down along the aorta. When the pressure pulse reaches the bifurcation in the lower abdomen, which is where the aorta forks in two to go into the legs, part of the pressure pulse rebounds and starts traveling up the aorta. If in the meantime the heart ejects more blood and a new pressure pulse is traveling down, these two pressure points will eventually collide somewhere along the aorta and produce an interference pattern. By placing the body in a sleep-like state, the gateway tapes achieve the same goal as meditation in that it places the body in such a profoundly relaxed state that the bifurcation echo slowly fades away as the heart lessens the force and frequency with which it pushes blood into the aorta. Now, again, this information is possibly not contextualized the correct way, knowing what we do about whether or not the heart is actually pumping blood or if the blood has its own momentum. But fundamentally, the result is the same as far as what they're talking about here, what Bentoff is describing. It's this coherence of the heartbeat and the resonant frequency that produces as the blood flows through the body in its cyclical fashion. The result is a regular rhythmic sine wave pattern of sound, which echoes throughout the body and rises up into the head in sustained resonance. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern, which measured with a sensitive seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it is operating normally. Wow, that's pretty crazy. I'm going to read that again. The amplitude of this sine wave pattern. So the sine wave pattern they're talking about here is the resonant frequency, the rhythmic pattern of the heart as the blood flows through the body, and that process unfolds, beats per second or whatever the measurement is. When measured with a seismograph type instrument, is about 3 times the average of the sound volume produced by the heart when it is operating normally. Wow. Brain stimulation. Bentoff's biomedical model shows that this resonance is of considerable importance since it is directly transmitted to and impacts upon the brain. The resulting vibration is received and transmitted into the brain itself via the fluid-filled third and left ventricles located above the brainstem. An electromagnetic pulse is then generated, which stimulates the brain to raise the amplitude and frequency of brainwave output, just as Dr. Twemlow observed in his research on the effects of the Hemi-Sync tapes. Although the brain is contained in a tight membrane called the dura, which is in turn cushioned by a thin layer of fluid located between it and the skull. That was a weird sentence. As the coherent resonance produced by the human heart in a state of profound relaxation reaches the fluid layer surrounding the brain, it sets up a rhythmic pattern in which the brain moves up and down approximately 0.005 to 0.010 millimeters in a continuous pattern. So your brain is literally oscillating within the fluid membrane between your actual brain matter and the skull. The self-reinforcing character of resonant behavior accounts for the body's ability to sustain this movement despite the minimal level of energy involved. I mean, your brain's literally a tuning fork at that point. It's like that documentary, Resonance, Beings of Frequency, which was, it was categorizing the sort of canary in the coal mine of all these people who are electrosensitive and experiencing the results of being exposed to all these frequencies that are, basically making their head vibrate at a tuning fork level that they can't even handle it anymore. And it's so interesting how not Breaking Bad, but how Better Call Saul totally whitewashed that phenomenon by having his brother portray it as just some psychosomatic thing that he made up that wasn't legit, right? And then he was literally like lining his walls with tinfoil, not letting cell phones anywhere near him. It's like, well, there's actually something to this if you're going by what the fucking army was saying in 1983. And I mean, the television was created in the 1950s. So, and movies in the 1930s, like they knew about this 100 years ago. This is just some classified document that was eventually, released that just shows that they were having to address Robert Monroe's techniques, right? Because he, when he came along. Anyway, in this way, the entire body, based on its own micro motion, functions as a tuned vibrational system which transfers energy in a range of between 6.8 and 7.5 hertz into the Earth's ionospheric cavity, which itself resonates at about 7 to 7.5 hertz. And this is, of course, referring to what is known as the Schumann resonance. And now Schumann does have some questionable connections and background, like all of the German scientists do from those days. But his experiment was he put volunteers below the ground and in a enclosed space where they could not be subject to or access the resonant frequency cycles per second that the Earth's ionosphere is resonating at and that we are connected to as fractals of it as far as the resonance pattern goes. And these people experienced all sorts of problems over the course of the study. So of this process, Bentov states, this is occurring at a very long wavelength of about 40,000 kilometers, or just about the perimeter of the planet. In other words, the signal from the movement of our bodies will travel around the world in about 1/7 of a second through the electrostatic field in which we are embedded. Such a long wavelength knows no obstacles, and its strength does not attenuate much over large distances. Naturally, it will go through just about anything: metal, concrete, water, and the fields making up our bodies. It is the ideal medium for conveying a telepathic signal. And this, of course, is how telepathy works functionally, is that wavelength produced by your entire energetic field when it's resonating with the ionospheric Earth resonance and all the cycles per second are cohered. You can project an image from your mind into the mind of another sentient creature or being that is also coherently resonating at the same frequency. Now, the problem, of course, is that the overwhelming majority of people are not resonating at this frequency because of the interference patterns from, all the electronics and Wi-Fi and radio signals and all this soup of pollution that we're all exposed to. And then, of course, there's all of the toxic food that is altering your ability to connect with that frequency as designed. There's all of the toxins and all of the products that everyone uses, and on and on and on it goes. We don't need to rehash all of those. But if we were all functioning as designed, these wavelengths, as this doctor is explaining here, they will penetrate anything, and this is how the collective awareness functions. We just don't realize it, right? We don't realize how powerful we really are, and everything is kind of muffled. And of course, the internet is mimicking this process. Like right now, I'm speaking to you and projecting a vibe and projecting the images in my mind somewhat through this medium, but you don't want to get it twisted and think that I'm only doing it, I'm into the internet, and then you're doing it as you, listen and observe the content on your end through your own internet connection. Well, you might not know it right now, but the waves that are coming out of my cycles per second rhythm are being spread all around me through the entire planet, right? And this is where people can have these, this happens to me sometimes where, somebody's not even aware of my channel, doesn't know anything that I've done, but then you'll see them talk about a very similar subject, And you'll see a lot of people talking about a similar subject or have a similar intuition at around the same time. And it's because we're all communicating with each other, and it's not being done through the internet. Especially those of us that have cleaned ourselves out enough to where we're operating closer to our intended design. Okay, moving on. Consequently, the gateway process is designed to rather rapidly induce a state of profound calm within the nervous system and to significantly lower blood pressure to cause the circulatory system, skeleton, and all other physical organ systems to begin vibrating coherently at approximately 7 to 7.5 cycles per second. Again, so the gateway process is artificially, through binaural beats and all of the subliminal suggestions and the scientific way that Monroe created the system, is forcing your body to slow down and start resonating in a pattern that mirrors the 7 to 7.5 cycles per second that the actual planet itself is resonating at. And this is where this is fascinating. The resulting resonance sets up a regular, repetitive sound wave which propagates in consonance with the electrostatic field of the Earth. And that's exactly what I was just talking about. And moreover, you see, this is so fascinating because when you go out into the woods, or you don't even have to be in the woods, if you just go out barefoot and start walking around on the actual Earth itself, you'll notice that when you start doing that, like before you do it, you're just like, in a normal frenetic state of mind, kind of like the frenetic state of mind that I'm in right now. If you, for example, compare the energy and the vibration that I'm oscillating at right now, it's more frenetic than the videos where I'm actually outside, in a much calmer state, discussing all of these issues. I mean, just go compare the Bitcoin video I just did yesterday and the fire ant video I did yesterday and this video where I'm in front of my computer recording, to the videos or the recordings where I'm outside in nature and have, been there for a half hour before I start recording. And you can see how, my state of mind is much calmer. I'm much more measured. I'm not tripping over my words because my mind's operating so fast, that faster than my mouth can get the words out, so it's just, it's amazing. That the Army was discussing this in 1983, and this is just the truth of the matter. You go out into nature and by grounding into and connecting with the Earth, you begin resonating at the same frequency that the Earth is resonating at. And this is doing the same thing that we were discussing just a few paragraphs ago, where the heart begins that process of entrainment with your brain, that everything slows down and you become more heart-centered, because that is what nature is designed to elicit, is that heart-centered equilibrium. So what Monroe has done here is create an artificial means of something that you can just achieve by going outside and walking on the ground for an hour. It's everything that's being discussed in this paper can be done naturally. And that's, all of these techniques that the meditators use, and the self-hypnosis techniques and all of that, the biofeedback, whatever it is, all of that is structured artificial techniques designed to do something that you can achieve without any sort of meditation. You just need to go outside and connect yourself with the Earth and ground yourself to its frequency. And you will achieve the same levels of intuition that you can achieve here. Now, as far as getting out of the body and all that stuff that the Monroe Institute gets into as we go, I just, like I said in one of the last videos, I have no interest in any of that. But still, I can't deny the phenomenon is taking place. As the body is turned into a coherent oscillator, vibrating in harmony with the surrounding electrostatic medium, the specific exercises included in the gateway tapes enjoin the participant to build up the energy field surrounding his body, presumably by using energy from the Earth's field, which the body is now entraining because of its ability to resonate with it. And that's crazy. I just explained what the next sentence was. I didn't even know that was coming. This puts the body's energy field into homogeneity with its surrounding environment and promotes movement of the seat of consciousness into the surrounding environment, partly in response to the fact that the two electromagnetic medians are now a single energy continuum. There it is. This is what happens when you go out into the woods and everything becomes melded together, right? And this is how the anchors of the birds and all of the sounds of nature begin anchoring your thoughts, because everything is merged together in a coherent fashion. All the animals are already operating at this frequency. It's just us that are totally disconnected from it. And so when I say that to somebody who's disconnected, they're like, oh, you're crazy. The bird is anchoring your thought. It's like, yes, it is. You just don't know. Thus, the same process which moves the brain into focused coherence at steadily higher levels of frequency and amplitude so as to entrain analogous frequencies in the universe for data collection also promotes enhancement of bodily energy levels to a point adequate to permit the subject to experience an out-of-body movement when he is ready to do so. More will be said about this topic later. In addition, by resonating with the Earth's electromagnetic sphere, the human body creates a surprisingly powerful carrier wave to assist the mind in communication activity with other human minds similarly tuned. Again, I already talked about that. This is telepathy. And again, telepathy is not how it is portrayed as I'm going to read your thoughts. No, it's an intentional thing that, and by intentional thing, I mean it is only allowed if your intent is pure. You can't, well, I won't say you can't. I've never actually tried to read somebody's thoughts. I mean, you can read a person's energy and you can feel where they're coming from. And a lot of times if they're a structural mind still imbued with propaganda, you can predict responses that they're going to make and you can predict reactions just from feeling them out in the moment. There's that, of course, that aspect to it. But as far as like actually reading a person's thoughts, I mean, that would just be a bad design by the creator. The creator, I mean, that would drive people insane if you were just hearing everyone's thoughts all the time. They portray that in all sorts of fiction, like in Legion they were just portraying that. I mean, you'd drive yourself crazy hearing everybody's thoughts. So it's more of a thing like, well, if I'm tuned into this resonant frequency and you're tuned into this resonant frequency like the animals are, and you project an image to that animal of anything, whatever it might be, they can pick up that image because the carrier wave, the wavelength, is going back and forth and permeating everything, up to and including the actual ionospheric energetic barrier of the Earth. And again, this is how the collective mind functions. And if we all figure this out, we can change the world like that. I mean, okay, how about this? I'm imagining an energetic barrier protecting my body and everyone else's body from all poisons and toxins. What if everybody had that thought in their mind? What do you think might happen over time? Food for thought. Moving on. Consciousness and energy. Before our explanation can proceed any further, it is essential to define the mechanism by which the human mind exercises the function known as consciousness, and to describe the way in which that consciousness operates to deduce meaning from the stimuli which it receives. To do this, we will first consider the fundamental character of the material world in which we have our physical existence in order to accurately perceive the raw stuff with which our consciousness must work. The first point which needs to be made is that the two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctly different states of existence in the physical world that we know it. Indeed, if the term matter is taken to mean solid substance, as opposed to energy, which is understood to mean a force of some sort, then the use of the former is entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons, which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus of the atom, and the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter in the strict construction of the term simply does not exist. So here we go with the holographic reality stuff. Rather, atomics, let me put it to you like this. I don't mean to say that all of these scientists are wrong. What I mean to say is that if you had never been told that an atom existed and you were just existing in the wild on the earth, sure, you might have an intuition about various aspects of the structure of the reality itself as far as the interference pattern goes of light interfering with light and creating an image, but you would probably never come up with the concept of atoms and electrons spinning around the atoms and blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's what I mean by artificial structure and sort of the disingenuous nature of the holographic reality narrative, okay? Yeah, sure, if scientifically they might be able to use their electronic microscopes and say, oh, well, actually, at a base level, this doesn't exist. But nature is a fractal of itself, and you can't see all the way down into the fractal. So as far as you know, you go down to a certain level, and it might be solid at a fractal beyond the level that you think is saying that actually it doesn't exist, solid matter, as it were. Which is only to say, I'm touching all of this stuff right now, and it's pretty solid. And I know all kinds of anecdotes out there about, well, when you reach a certain level of enlightenment, you can just walk through walls. Well, maybe you can. I'm not there yet, and I have no desire to walk through walls, so I probably never will be. Anyway, solid matter in the strict construction of the term simply does not exist. Rather, atomic structure is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other oscillating energy grids which orbit at extraordinarily high speeds. In his book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, Itzhak Bentov gives the following figures. The energy grid which composes the nucleus of the atom vibrates at approximately 10 to the 22nd power hertz, which means 10 followed by 22 zeros. At 70 degrees Fahrenheit, an atom oscillates at the rate of 10 to the 15th power hertz. An entire molecule composed of a number of atoms bound together in a single energy field vibrates in the range of 10 to the 9th power hertz. A live human cell vibrates at approximately 10 to the 3rd hertz. The point to be made is that the entire human being, brain, consciousness, and all is, like the universe which surrounds him, nothing more or less than an extraordinarily complex system of energy fields. Well, that of course is true. The so-called states of matter are actually variances in the state of energy, and human consciousness is a function of the interaction of energy in two opposite states, motion versus rest, in a manner described in the following paragraph. Oh, here we go though. Next paragraph, holograms. Energy creates, stores, and retrieves meaning in the universe by projecting or expanding at certain frequencies in a three-dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. The concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using an example cited by Bentov in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water into which 3 pebbles are dropped. As the ripples created by the simultaneous entry of the 3 pebbles radiate outward towards the rim of the bowl, Bentov further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantly. The ice is removed, leaving the 3 pebbles still laying at the bottom of the bowl. Then the ice is exposed to a powerful, coherent source of light, such as a laser. The result will be a 3-dimensional model or representation of the position of the 3 pebbles suspended in midair. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail that, for example, it is possible to take a holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye when the glass of water itself is examined. The whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked out by Denis Gabor in 1947. He later won a Nobel Prize for his work. Laboratory demonstration of Gabor's work only occurred years later, following invention of the laser. Now, this is interesting. as it relates to that post I have up on my blog from Jonathan, where he was talking about these principles of holography and lasers and extra dimensional perception. So you might want to check that out for further elaboration on the concept that's being discussed here. Because, of course, his intent is purer than the U.S. Army as far as explaining this stuff goes. As biologist Lyle Watson explains, the purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When two laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And of course, this is happening in your mind, when, or your mind's eye, as it were, when when we were just going over that image that he was trying to put in your mind of the pebbles in the water, that image that's produced in your mind's eye is just interference patterns. If you imagine it like a hologram, like two lasers interacting with each other, like crossing laser streams, that interference pattern actually creates the image, which is that pond with, the ripples, and then, the whole thought experiment that was going through there. And so that's what they mean by interference patterns and holographic reality. But of course, for that to make sense, we would have to be inside of someone else's interference patterns or thought form, or or dream, as it were, right? It would be, for that to be true, that would have to be the case. The purest kind of, because otherwise, all of this is so physical and solid, it has to be at a scale above our perceptive abilities for that to make sense. The purest kind of light available to us is that produced by a laser, which sends out a beam in which all the waves are of one frequency, like those made by an ideal pebble in a perfect pond. When two laser beams touch, they produce an interference pattern of light and dark ripples that can be recorded on a photographic plate. And if one of the beams, instead of coming directly from the laser, is reflected first off an object such as a human face, the resulting pattern will be very complex indeed, but it can still be recorded. The record will be a hologram of the face. The part encodes the whole. Of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and broke it into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. And again, this is just fractals, right? The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection, but the fact remains that a whole projection would nonetheless be made. The key to creating any hologram is that the energy in motion must interact with energy in a state of rest. In the foregoing example, the pebbles represent energy in motion, while the water, before its agitation by the pebbles, represents energy at a state of rest. To activate, or in effect to perceive, the meaning of a holograph, energy, in this case a coherent light source such as a laser beam, must be passed through the interference pattern generated by interaction between the moving energy and the energy at rest. This is interesting because it sounds a lot like what Walter Russell talked about. In the simple example given by Bentoff, this requirement was fulfilled by holding the frozen interference pattern in front of the coherent light to project the three-dimensional holographic image, its meaning, into space. As Marilyn Ferguson, editor of the Brain Mind Bulletin, tells us, another feature of a hologram is its efficiency. Billions of bits of information can be stored in a tiny space. The pattern of the holographic photograph is stored everywhere on the plate. Oh, that's fascinating. I was just in that Order Out of Chaos recording, I was talking about photography and the soul, and that's really fascinating that the holographic pattern is stored everywhere on the plate. The consciousness matrix. Oh boy, here we go. Let's see what this is all about. The universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in and of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity. And a lot, this is semantics, but I'll just let it go. And, I just have a resistance to the structure of it all. I just, my problem with it is not that it's not accurate. It's just I don't see the point in labeling everything like this, you know. But then the mind that is analyzing this information is trying to come at it from a structural perspective. It's disconnected from, you know, it's so amazing that this person, well, of course, I don't know this person. They might know way more than I know. They might be connected to the earth in the way that a lot of us are becoming. But, you know, if you are connected in that way, I don't think you would, you know, be perceiving things in quite this way. But again, he was just tasked with reporting it to his superior officer. So we'll just move on without any more pontification. According to the theories of Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London, the human mind is also a hologram which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. With respect to states of expanded or altered consciousness such as Gateway uses, the process operates in the following way. As energy passes through various aspects of the universal hologram and is perceived by the electrostatic fields which comprise the human mind, the holographic images being conveyed are projected upon those electrostatic fields of the mind and are perceived or understood to the extent that the electrostatic field is operating at a frequency and amplitude that can harmonize with and therefore read the energy carrier wave pattern passing through it. Again, that's a really complicated way of explaining what I was saying about in your mind's eye, the two light patterns interfering with each other to produce the image. Like you would view a hologram, you know, they've put Tupac, for example, on stage. That's just projectors projecting light at various different points to create a 360 holistic interference pattern that produces a 3D image for you to view. Which is essentially what they're saying reality is here, a unimaginably complex projector system that is projecting this, what we perceive as physical reality, because as the theory goes, our state of consciousness and our perceptive abilities are so limited that, and probably limited by design because we would go insane if we understood the actual reality of our situation, if that is the case. And then that creates the gigantic interference pattern that we perceive as solid because we're at a different level of the fractal. Changes in the frequency and amplitude of the electrostatic field which comprises the human mind determines the configuration and hence the character of the holographic energy matrix which the mind projects to intercept meaning directly from the holographic transmissions of the universe. Then, to make sense of what the holographic image is saying to it, the mind proceeds to compare the image just received with itself. Specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram which constitutes memory. By registering differences in geometric form and in energy frequency, the consciousness perceives, as psychologist Keith Floyd puts it, contrary to what everyone knows is so, it may not be the brain that produces consciousness, but rather consciousness that creates the appearance of the brain. Yes, of course, this is the very popular narrative that is being put out there by all sorts of questionable characters. So you gotta really have your guard up when you're consuming this information. You know, fucking Deepak Chopra would probably tell you that sentence that I just read. You know, so, but again, they always control the opposition. So as science and religion begin their contrived merger to reveal truths that have been known in ancient traditions for hundreds and thousands of years, or hundreds and or thousands of years, of course they're going to have their approved personalities out there discussing these things in a way that controls the narrative and doesn't explain it in a way that unleashes your true potential and power. And it was also interesting that this sentence, specifically, it does this by comparing the image received with that part of its own hologram, which constitutes memory. And that's that's really interesting. Going back to those videos I did about time and emit and the feedback loops of your memory fields of information, and that's essentially what it is, right? You're processing these events, and then they are stored as interference patterns that resemble the actual event that occurred in physical reality, but it's just that image in your mind's eye, you know. And it's stored as that. So it's stored as those interference patterns, which then loop on themselves, both your memories of the past and then your projections of the future. And this is how they control our minds, by controlling how we view ourselves in the past and how we view the potential or possible future outcomes. So that's another way to view it, just holographically, right? Or through interference patterns. 15. Let's see how much longer. Oh man, I'm barely halfway done with this. I might have to break this up into 2 parts. Brain in phase. The consciousness process is most easily envisaged if we picture the holographic input with a 3-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, such that all of the energy patterns contained within can be described in terms of 3-dimensional geometry, using mathematics to reduce the data to 2-dimensional form. Bentoff states that scientists suspect that the human mind operates on a simple binary go, no-go system, as do all digital computers. Therefore, once it superimposes a 3-dimensional matrix over holographic information it wishes to interpret and reduces that information mathematically to 2-dimensional form, it can completely process it using its fundamental binary system, just as any computer made by the hand of man can process volumes of data and make various comparisons between the data and information stored in its digital memory. Our minds operate in the same way, perceiving by comparison only. Bentoff states the proposition this way: our whole reality is constructed by constantly making such comparisons. Whenever we perceive something, we always perceive differences only. In states of expanded consciousness, the right hemisphere of the human brain in its holistic, nonlinear, and nonverbal mode of functioning acts as the primary matrix or receptor for this holographic input, while by operating in phase or coherence with the right brain, the left hemisphere provides the secondary matrix through its binary, computer-like method of functioning to screen further the data by comparison and reduce it to a discrete 2-dimensional form. And that's really what I'm getting at, is this is a very left brain dominated interpretation of reality. You know, it's trying to, in a binary computer-like fashion, categorize everything and explain it, when some things are simply so beyond that sort of categorization that it limits the possibilities, or it limits your perception of what is going on. And that's really my only problem with it all. I mean, that is the way that most things are approached in mainstream society. Everything is binary, classified, debated. I mean, debate, I always laugh when somebody says, oh, I put my views out there, come debate me. What? You have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, we're on a level that's so far beyond debating. I mean, the truth is self-evident. It cannot be debated. It is only when you bring in subjective interpretations that you can then engage in debate. And that's what's so dangerous about spiritual teachings that are really functioning on this binary, computer-like, categorized interpretation, while masquerading as a expansive, right brain, you know, limitless interpretation of our reality. In other words, despite their well-intentioned design, or even those who are promoting it, their well-intentioned purpose, they are simultaneously limiting you with a structural pattern that is artificially limiting your energy body, that it's limiting your connection with the Earth's field of energy, you know, because that's, even though people would say, well, the Earth has chakras like your body has chakras, well, that's sure, you can view it in that way, but I would prefer to view it in a way that is totally unlimited by any sort of structure whatsoever. Anyway, moving on. To the extent that Gateway succeeds in bringing about a refinement in energy matrix of the mind, it succeeds in expanding or altering human consciousness so that it can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical senses. such that ever more of the universal hologram, not of course accessible by sense perception, can ultimately be perceived and understood. And, a lot of what the Monroe Institute is doing is also or allowing people to experience is also what DMT anecdotally allows people to experience, as far as what they perceive when their body is flooded with DMT. Marilyn Ferguson has written that the theories of Pribram and Baum appear to account for all transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. She goes on to say of Pribram, currently he is proposing a startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among those intrigued by the mysteries of human consciousness. His holographic model marries brain research to theoretical physics. It accounts for normal perception and simultaneously takes the paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the supernatural by explaining them as a part of nature. Like certain strange discoveries of quantum physics, the radical reorientation of this theory suddenly makes sense of paradoxical sayings of mystics throughout the ages. And again, there is the merger of science and religion that is the underpinning of the New Age philosophies, which rely heavily on everything that we've discussed so far, self-cognition. To complete our outline of the process by which the mind achieves and exercises consciousness, we must also describe the mechanism which accounts for the aspect of human thought that differentiates it from the consciousness of plants or animals, i.e. self-cognition. Humans not only know, but they know that they know. Well, see, again, this is kind of a disconnected view of the situation. The animals know that they know too. They just don't have the storage capacity that our brains have. In other words, they don't have the memory that we have. But in the moment, they know more than you do. Okay? They know more about what's going on than you do. Either you know that or you don't. It's a self-evident fact. They are able to monitor the process of their own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. Moreover, let me rephrase because this is referring to humans. Humans not only know, but they know that they know. They are able to monitor the process of their own thinking and maintain an awareness of it. Moreover, they can conduct a comparative assessment. Oh boy, what did I do? Sorry, this page is a little off center. I couldn't read that. Let's go back here. Moreover, they can conduct a comparative assessment evaluating the function of their thought processes against various objective standards they have adopted. Human consciousness can do this because it has the capacity to duplicate aspects of its own hologram, project them out, perceive that projection, put it through comparison with the memory aspect, where its evaluation standards of measure are stored, of its own hologram, and measure or sense the differences using three-dimensional geometry and then binary go, no-go pulse to yield verbal cognition about the self. Well, that was a mouthful, basically trying to explain the way information is put into your sensory perception system and then come out the other end as words. But of course, this goes to the very structure of the control system, right? They invented all of the languages. They invented all of these phrases and neurolinguistic programming, which manipulates. Again, neurolinguistic programming is doing the exact same thing, bypassing the left brain directly, subliminally into the right brain, where it is then subconsciously registered, and then it affects your then outward movements and projections and words and actions and all of that. So, again, this is 1983 that they're talking about all this stuff, but I mean, I'm reading this. Would you be surprised if I said this was a document from 2017, from last year? No, I mean, it just shows you how far beyond our current level of understanding they have to be, I mean, this is just an army document, these are just some low-level compartmentalized grunts in the army, Time, space, dimension. I don't know what this is going to say, but anytime space-time's brought up, it's probably going to evoke some Einstein nonsense, but we'll see. Although it was Einstein who said reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one, and that's pretty true, right? That's kind of a nutshell of my problem with the whole thing, you know? It's a very persistent illusion, regardless of what these scientists might be able to supposedly prove. It's still a persistent illusion. So you better treat it like it matters, you know? Up to this point, our discussion of the gateway process has been relatively simple and easy to follow. Oh, really? Now the fun begins. Gateway involves more than just perception of those aspects of the universal hologram which can be accessed in the dimension of time-space as we know it. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space is the next task which must be addressed. Well, again, see, I'm not gonna read on. I'm just gonna state at the beginning something and see what happens. Again, the concept of space-time is erroneous. Time is an element of reality in the sense of an element like, you know, carbon or whatever on the periodic table of elements, right? I mean, when you are experiencing this physical reality, time is an aspect of it. It's just ingrained within it. So, you know, people want to say that time doesn't exist, but that's just simply not true. Again, as a concept of seconds, minutes, hours, all that artificial garbage, yeah, time doesn't exist, but we still age, we still progress moment to moment in a progression of moment to moments that we perceive as a passage of time. And then we, of course, have memories that reinforce that. And we have a concept of the future that also reinforces that. So, you know, this is just really a critique of time travel where, you know, physically time travel is highly unlikely. But mental consciousness time travel would, in this system, be entirely possible. To explain how and why human consciousness can be brought to transcend the limitations of time-space is the next task which must be addressed. To do this, we must first appreciate what time and space are in order to understand how the dimension that they constitute can be transcended. Physicists define time as a measurement of energy or force in motion, blah, blah, blah. In other words, it is a measurement of change, blah, blah, blah. However, in order for energy to be, I'm sorry, my apologies. In order for energy to be in motion, it must first be limited in some way within the confines of some sort of vibratory pattern so that its confinement gives it the capacity for being contained at a specific location which is distinguishable from other locations, space. Energy which is not confined is force without limit, without dimension, without the limits of form. It is infinity, cannot move because there is nothing beyond infinity, and is therefore outside of the dimension of time. It is also beyond space because the concept implies that a specific energy form is limited to a specific location and is absent from other locations. But if energy is in the state of infinity, there are no boundaries, no here to differentiate from there, no sense of area. Energy in infinity means energy uniformly extended without limit. It has no beginning, no end, no location. It is conscious force, the fundamental primal power of existence without form, a state of infinite being. Energy in infinity is said to be completely at rest and therefore cannot generate holograms so long as it remains utterly inactive. It retains its inherent capacity for consciousness in that it can receive and passively perceive holograms generated by energy and motion out in the various dimensions which make up the created universe, but it cannot be perceived by consciousness operating in the active universe. Energy in this state of inactive infinity is termed by physicists as energy in its absolute state, or simply the absolute. Between the absolute and the material universe in which we experience our physical existence are various intervening dimensions to which human consciousness in altered states of being may gain access. Theoretically, human consciousness may continue to expand the horizons of its perceptual capability until it reaches the dimension of the absolute, at which point perception stops because the absolute generates no holograms of or about itself. Ooh, man, oh man. Now, unlike other paragraphs in this document, that one didn't jump out as containing anything like just glaringly true, if you know what I mean. Like, my reaction to that is, nah, okay, if you say so. You know? Like, okay, here's my thing. Using these techniques, or anyone who has ever got out of body, astral projected, and supposedly traversed higher dimensions, all the way up and into the absolute state, as it is referred to here. they can describe what they saw in that state of mind, right? But at the same point in time, that's just it's a perception no different than the supposed illusion of what we call matter in physical reality here. In other words, we're talking about something so advanced and so beyond our ability to perceive it that I think it's really naive for someone to claim that they have traversed all the dimensions that there are, reached the absolute state of enlightenment as far as perceiving the highest form of the fractal, when our perception is so limited here. Surely your perception, even in a higher state of consciousness where you're getting into other dimensions, needs to be questioned as well. I guess I'm just saying, exercise some caution on people who proclaim, like, based on this information, some certainty about, well, there are 24 dimensions and 17 subdimensions and blah, blah, blah. Again, artificial structure. There's no need to label it like that. It just is what it is. But everybody's on their own wavelength, as it were, and I don't want to come down on you if that's what you're all about. That's fine. I mean, I'm not going to be disingenuous and pretend like I don't think you're wrong, but that people tend to say that, especially in the spiritual crowds, to be like, well, that's just your perception, and I'm okay with that. But what they're really saying is, I don't agree with you at all. But this is a approved way that I can say that within my community of love and lighters. But moving on, intervening dimensions. I hope this is, I think we're getting close. I think there was like 26. Let me check real quick. Oh man, 30. 37. Might have to break this up into 2 parts. That doesn't seem that much longer though. Just keep reading it. All right, where are we at here? Here we go. Intervening dimensions. Since the absolute is conscious energy in infinity, i.e. without boundaries, it occupies every dimension to include the time-space dimension in which we have our physical existence, but we cannot perceive it. It overlays everything, as do many of the intervening gradients or dimensions through which the energies of the universe pass on their way to and from their home in the state of infinity, the absolute. To enter these intervening dimensions, human consciousness must focus with such intense coherence that the frequency of the energy pattern which comprises that consciousness, i.e. the brainwave output, can accelerate to the point where the resulting frequency pattern, if displayed on an oscilloscope, would look virtually like a solid line. That's really interesting. Right, remember what Jonathan was talking about the scalar jumps in patterns, and how when the wavelength oscillated at such a high level on the one scale that it would be then perceived by you wouldn't be able to perceive the wavelengths anymore, and then there'd be a jump up. That's fascinating. Achievement of this state of altered consciousness sets the stage for perception of non-time space dimensions because of the operation of a principle in physics known as Planck's distance. This is an aspect of quantum mechanics, now we're in questionable territory, which applies to the fact that any oscillating frequency, such as a brainwave, reaches 2 points of complete rest, which constitute the boundaries of each individual oscillation, i.e. movement up or down. Without these points of rest, an oscillating wave pattern would be impossible, since the points of rest are required to permit the energy to change direction and thus continue vibrating between rigid limits. But it is also true that when, for an infinitesimally brief instant, that energy reaches one of its 2 points of rest, it clicks out of time-space and joins infinity. That critical step out of time-space occurs when the speed of the oscillation drops below the 10 to the negative 33 centimeters per second Planck's distance. To use the words of Bentov, quantum mechanics tells us that when distances go below Planck's distance, we enter, in effect, a new world. To return to our case in point, the human consciousness wave pattern reaches such high frequency that the pattern of clickouts comes so close together that there is virtual continuity in it. Then, a portion of that consciousness is actually postulated to establish and maintain its information collection function in those dimensions located between time, space, and the absolute. Thus, as the almost continuous clickout pattern establishes itself in continuous phase at speeds below Planck's distance, but before reaching the state of total rest, human consciousness passes through the looking glass of time-space after the fashion of Alice beginning her journey into Wonderland. The gateway experience with its associated Hemi-Sync technique is apparently designed, if used systematically and patiently, to enable human consciousness to establish a coherent pattern of perception in those dimensions where speeds below Planck's distance apply. This holds true irrespective of whether the individual is exercising his consciousness while in his physical body or whether he is doing so after having separated that consciousness from the physical body, i.e. the so-called out-of-body state mentioned earlier. So I guess I should be a little more accepting of this whole thing, you know. I've never experienced anything like this. Again, I've had no interest in it. I would never buy Robert Monroe's tapes. I have no interest in any of this. I'm just going to stay on Earth and hone my intuition by connecting with and to the Earth. But, you know, I can't fault anybody who's more adventurous and an experimenter and, you know, gets into all this stuff and wants to experience it. And since I haven't experienced it, I can't speak to out-of-body experiences like other people speak to them. So, you know, I'm probably a little bit too harsh on people that are talking about this stuff. There's really not much to add other than that. It's just a realization I had right now. Subatomic particles. And, you know, it's a trap that I fall into just as much as anyone else, where I get this, you know, it's something that I always want to avoid, but I get trapped in it sometimes, this single-mindedness, this, you know, I know that there's so much manipulation in quantum physics and quantum mechanics that I just want to, you know, throw it all out, right? It's all bullshit. But again, that's not how it works. There's, of course, truth in there. And, you know, I need to be more level-headed when I'm reading about it and say, okay, well, this could be one of the true things, you know? So, again, real-time self-analysis here. Okay, subatomic particles. The behavior of subatomic particles provides an interesting example of the phenomenon of clicking out discussed in the preceding paragraphs. In an article prepared for Science Digest magazine, Dr. John Gleedman mentions the way in which subatomic particles communicate with each other once their energy fields become entrained as a result of colliding with each other. The communication concerned is, of course, postulated to be occurring during the click-out phase, in the oscillation of the energy fields comprising the subatomic particles concerned. It is this cause which accounts for the cross-communication at what, in terms of time-space velocities, would seem to involve speeds in excess of light. Again, speed of light, pointless concept. There I go, I just did it again. Oh boy. In reality, Einstein's theory of relativity is not being invalidated, but rather the communication concerned is taking place outside the dimension of time-space to which the theory of relativity is strictly confined. Specifically, Dr. Gleedman tells us, quantum theory postulates a kind of long-range Siamese twin effect whenever two subatomic particles collide and then go their different ways. And this is quantum entanglement, right? Even when the particles are halfway across the universe from each other, it says they instantaneously respond to each other's actions. And in doing so, they violate relativity's ban on faster-than-light velocities. Indeed, regarding attempts to quantify what is known about the behavior of energy in dimensions apparently outside of time-space, Bentov speaks about courageous physicists who are working on hypothetical particles called tachyons. Wait a second. Aren't tachyons from Star Trek? Anyway. Which can move at speeds higher than light. Again, here's the merger of science fiction and actual quantum physics that is supposedly real science and real physics. The speed of tachyons start just above the speed of light and ranges all the way to infinite velocities. again, there's a relativity of time in the sense of a relativity of scale, like the difference between a hummingbird or an ant's perception of time and your perception of time. But the way that it's sold by this theory of relativity and the speed of light and all that is just, this is one of the aspects of quantum theory that is total bunk, in my opinion. Dimensions in between. Now that we have postulated the legitimacy of the assertion that the energy forms which compose consciousness can move beyond the time-space dimension, we need to turn our attention to energy forms. Well, first, let's just go over this document real quick. The absolute in infinity. This is discussing the sine waves and the Planck's distance and the oscillations. Yeah, I see what they're going for here. So basically, they're saying that Robert Monroe's techniques takes your brain waves out of this normal oscillation function between the visible and sonic spectrum that we can perceive, clicks out into a portion of energy that we normally cannot perceive, or a resonance that we normally cannot perceive. And this is how people experience the quote-unquote higher dimensions in the astral plane. But I hope you understand that the astral plane is not a physical thing. It is an energetic projection of the mind, just as much as physical reality is within this interpretation. Oh, I forgot what that was. Okay, we need to turn our attention to the energy forms which inhabit those dimensions between time, space, and the absolute. In so doing, we may better perceive the form that reality assumes when we encounter it in those intermediate dimensions. In this context, Bentoff tells us that the causal relationship between events breaks down. Movements become jerky rather than smooth. Time and space may become grainy or chunky. Perhaps a piece of space can be traversed by a particle of matter in any direction without necessarily being synchronized with a piece of time. In short, a pair of events will occur in either time or space, the pair not being connected causally but a random fluctuation. What Bentoff means is that inside the dimension of time-space, where both concepts apply in a generally uniform way, there is a proportional relationship between them. A certain space can be covered by energy moving in either particle or waveform in a certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in the time-space universe. The relationship is neat and predictable. However, in the intermediate dimensions beyond time-space, the limitations imposed on energy to put it into a state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical universe. A myriad of various distortions and incongruities are thus likely to be encountered, such that our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space as we know it in this dimension do not apply. But even more important, access is open to both the past and the future when the dimension of current time-space is left behind. Special status, out-of-body experience. Although human consciousness can, with enough practice, move beyond the dimension of time-space and interface with other energy systems in other dimensions, the entire process is appreciably enhanced if that consciousness can be detached in large measure from the physical body before such interface is attempted. Once an individual becomes proficient in the technique of out-of-body movement and then reaches the point where he is able to break out of time-space while out of his body, he gains the advantage of clicking out part of his enhanced consciousness while starting from a base located much closer to the dimensions with which he wishes to communicate. In other words, since he is starting from a point much higher up, to use an analogy from the time-space context, that part of his consciousness involved in clicking out will have that much more time to interact in dimensions beyond time-space because less time is required to traverse the intervening layers. Moreover, once the individual is able to project his consciousness beyond time-space, that consciousness would logically tend to entrain its frequency output with the new energy environment to which it is exposed, therein greatly enhancing the extent to which the individual's altered consciousness may be further modified to achieve a much heightened point of focus and a much refined oscillating pattern. As a result, a self-reinforcing process should ensue whereby the farther consciousness in the out-of-body state can be projected beyond the time-space dimension, the more its level of energy output would be enhanced, thus promoting the potential for still further travel. The tentative conclusion to be drawn is that the out-of-body state may be regarded as an extremely effective way of accelerating the process of enhancing consciousness and of interfacing with dimensions beyond time-space. If the practitioner of the gateway technique has a choice of concentrating on achieving and exploiting the out-of-body experience as opposed to concentrating his full efforts on expanding his consciousness exclusively from a physical base, the former would appear to promise much faster and more impressive success than does the latter. Absolute in perspective. It may be helpful at this point to pause and recap the major aspects of our intellectual journey from time-space to the realm of the absolute. We have spoken at some length concerning the incredibly complex hologram which is created by the intersection of energy patterns generated by the totality of all dimensions in the universe, time-space included. We have noted that our minds constitute energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere of our brains to reduce it to a form that we employ for the process of we call thinking. We have implied that this hologram is the finite embodiment in active energy form of the infinite consciousness of the absolute. It is the title we assign to that vast pool of energy in a state of perfect rest over which the physical universe is layered and from whence it comes. Incidentally, to describe this, Bentov uses the analogy of a very deep sea, comparing the still depths of the sea to the dimension of the absolute, while assigning the storm-tossed waves above to represent the physical universe with which we are familiar. Now, that's actually a pretty good thought experiment to perceive what might be taking place. However, how do they differentiate the illusion from matter? You see, the deep sea is just the same as the sea above, where all the waves are crashing onto each other. And this is, again, my whole criticism of this philosophy. Especially when it can be used, as I said in the last video, to control the minds of people to, not take any sort of beneficial action in their own lives, understanding the brilliance and the amazingness of this experience that they've been given when, regardless of how bad they might have it or how down they might get, then that loops on itself, and then you start, going back to your addictions, you start feeling sorry for yourself, you start saying, none of this matters, it's just whatever, I'm just going to do my thing and get through this as fast as possible, all of that, loops in on itself, and you lose your sense of awe for the chance you've been given to develop your own consciousness and by extension the collective awareness as a whole. We all have that chance with every word we speak, with every action we take. And you want to tell me that that's an illusion? Okay, well, it's an amazing dream then. That's fine. Let's become lucid in the dream then. The slightly agitated currents. Oh, and just to add, if you become lucid in the dream, then you start controlling your dream. And sometimes you don't even control the dream. You're lucid in it, and you say, well, let's just see what happens. Let's see what either I'm being manipulated to think in my dream, or let's see what my subconscious is bringing to the surface in this moment. Because, of course, there are different dreams. Sometimes you get manipulated. Sometimes you don't. Okay. The slightly agitated currents of the sea can be found in between the turbulent surface and the totally still depths, represent energy in the process of either going into rest, approaching infinity, or coming out of rest. From Big Bang to Torus. Oh boy, this should be good. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory. Well, see, there's the problem right there, because I'm sure at the time, 1983, the Big Bang was widely accepted, but we know now that it was completely contrived by a Jesuit priest, first of all, and second of all, we know that this is most likely a complete fabrication of, or at the very least, a metaphor for the Big Bang that is created when a thought form is seeded, and then it's in continual expansion from there, as they say, that the universe is continually expanding, and then there will be a big crunch eventually, as this theory goes, and then it ties into the whole cycle thing, and then there's all sorts of analogies that can be made to the Big Bang of the sperm penetrating the egg and creating life. They drew the Big Bang theory from that actual process of inseminating an egg. Working from the widely accepted Big Bang theory, Bentov presents a conceptual model to depict the process of time-space evolution, the relative position of the universal hologram. That hologram is often called a torus because it is thought to have the overall shape of an immense self-contained spiral. Basing his thesis on recent studies concerning the distribution of quasars, and operating on the premise that in the universe, smaller processes tend to mirror images of larger ones, as above, so below. The pattern of electrons around the nucleus of an atom mirrors the way planets orbit their suns and so on. Yeah, there you go. Bentov postulates the following scenario. Taking his cue from the observed capability of quasars to eject enormously concentrated beams of matter from their interiors in a controlled, non-concentric version of the Big Bang, he envisages a similar process occurring in the generation of the universe. Noting that those galaxies located to the north of our own galaxy are moving way faster than those located to the south, and that those to the east and west are demonstrably more distant, Bentov regards this as substantive evidence that the jet of matter which expanded into our universe has turned back upon itself, eventually forming an ovoid or egg shape. He sees matter in our universe entering the ovoid pattern following ejection from a nucleus composed of extremely compressed energy through a white hole. At the end of its trip to the far end of the ovoid, he sees it departing via a black hole. In such a model, time is observed to be a measure of the change which occurs as energy evolves into new, more complex forms as it progresses along the distance from the white hole side of the nucleus around the shell of this cosmic egg until it enters the black hole. And there's all sorts of ancient traditions that talk about the cosmic egg. That doesn't mean they're correct, it's just they're there. In other words, as energy, expelled from infinity and confined within limits by the conscious of the absolute, achieves form and motion following ejection from the white hole at the top of the egg, time begins as a measure of the cadence of this evolutionary movement as reality goes around the shell of the egg on its journey to the black hole at the far end. There's all kinds of people who talk about this, the Taurus, what's his name? Nassim Harriman and Marco Rodin, or Mark Rodin, I can't remember. They talk about this type of stuff, and use your discernment on whether or not you should be listening to their alternative explanations as compared to these official explanations. Our place in time. The observed distribution of galaxies suggests that our particular universe is located near the top of the egg at the point where matter begins to fall back on itself, thus explaining the reason why the galaxies to the north are seen to be moving away more rapidly as they are caught up in the downturn of the stream of matter towards the far end of the cosmic egg. Layered over this cosmic egg is the absolute, which sustains the radiating nucleus from which the original jet of matter issued forth. As the stream of matter moves around the ovoid towards its destination at the black hole, so these are the images that they were talking about, right? The simple torus, that's a well, again, they're basically describing a vortex, right? And going back to the video on the heart, we know that our heart is a implosive vortex, most likely, more so than a pump. So it would, it would make sense in that fractal, capacity that the Earth itself would be a vortex of energy in the same way. And because it would have to be, if we are able to achieve coherence as far as the Schumann resonance goes, resonant coherence as far as our heartbeat and the way that it sonically pulsates through our whole energy body and the way that coheres with the Earth's frequency, right? So they would have to be of a similar structure. So yeah, the Earth, the Earth is most likely a toroid vortexual energy pattern. So, and arguing over what shape that actually manifests as in physical reality is entirely pointless to me. But I understand that people are interested, and I've been interested in it in the past and done all sorts of research into it, but that's neither here nor there. Well, it is kind of related because I think the geocentric model of the universe, which was the standard model until the heliocentric model came around in like the 15th century. I think that model makes more sense as far as the Earth being the actual center of our perceived universe, of the center of the thought form, in other words, as opposed to the way that they try to spin the, infinite universe of infinite blah, 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 Because again, that's another thing that takes away from the specialness and amazingness of our physical reality itself, you know. Because when we start developing that sort of reverence, we can affect a lot of change in our thoughts and actions, especially if it starts to resonate with a large amount of people collectively. So what did that say? As the stream of matter moves around the ovoid towards its destination at the black hole, where it will be reabsorbed into the radiating nucleus and then the absolute, it generates the interference pattern within the cosmic egg, which constitutes the universal hologram or torus. Since the torus is being simultaneously generated by matter in all the various phases of time, it reflects the development of the universe in the past, present, and future, as it would be seen from our particular perspective in one phase of time. By reflecting on this model, it becomes possible to see how human consciousness brought to a sufficiently altered, focused state could obtain information concerning the past, present, and future, since they all exist in the universal hologram simultaneously. In the case of the future, because all of the consequences of the past and present can be seen coming together in the hologram such that the future can be predicted or seen with total accuracy. Moreover, it is possible to see how the implosion of energy patterns would cross and recross to create an incredibly complex four-dimensional hologram or torus. Again, this is the energy pattern of the heart, the implosion, in spiral shape in reflection of the multidimensional developing pattern of evolution. All of the movements of the energies which comprise the universe leave their mark and hence tell their story throughout time. Quality of consciousness. We noted earlier that the out-of-body state involves projection of a major portion of the energy pattern that represents human consciousness, so that it may move either freely throughout the terrestrial sphere for purposes of information acquisition or into other dimensions outside of time-space, perhaps to interact with other forms of consciousness within the universe. Consciousness is the organizing and sustaining principle that provides the impetus and guidance to bring and keep energy in motion within a given set of parameters so that a specific reality will resolve. When consciousness reaches a state of sophistication in which it can perceive itself, its own hologram, it reaches the point of self-cognition. Human beings have this form of elevated consciousness, as does the absolute, but in case of the latter, it is a function of energy and its associated quality of consciousness in infinity, omniscience and omnipotence and perceptual unity. When energy returns to a state of total rest within the absolute, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex an energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. That's interesting. Let me read that again. Thus, the more complex an energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it possesses to maintain its reality. Our consciousness, therefore, is that differentiated aspect of the universal consciousness which resides within the absolute. It accounts for the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but is distinctly separate from and superior to it. I don't know about that. It's one and the same, you know. This is, again, is that mentality. Your body and its energy field is an expression of the quote-unquote absolute. It is a fractal of it. It is not in any way inferior to it, in my subjective interpretation. Since consciousness exists quite apart from and outside of reality, beyond the bounds of time-space, it, like the absolute, has neither beginning nor end. Reality has both a beginning and an end because it is bounded within time-space, which is just another way of saying your perception. Yeah, it has a beginning and an end because your perception both begins and ends. That's it, you know. And your perception has time as a reality of its perceptive abilities. And, you know, this whole time-space thing is just bothersome. But the fundamental quantum of energy and its associated consciousness is eternal. And again, that's an idea that goes way back into all of the ancient traditions. But again, that's an easy way to discount your experience now by saying, well, I'm just this eternal consciousness. So, you know, I'm just going to do my thing and I'm not going to worry about anything so much. It is what it is. Nothing I can do about it. So let's just party, you know, which happens in a lot of these new age circles. You know, a lot of these like people that I've interacted with who, come from those like yoga, transcendental meditation circles, they're like somewhat degenerate as far as like sexual stuff goes, and drama, and like, I don't know. That's why I have an aversion to those sort of structured things that promote those sort of ideas. It just all like coalesces in this anti-life energy. I don't know. It's weird. Consciousness in perspective. Having ascertained that human consciousness is able to separate from physical reality and interact with other intelligences in other dimensions within the universe, and that it is both eternal and destined for ultimate return to the absolute, we are faced with the question, so what happens then? Since memory is a function of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character as the consciousness which accounts for its existence, it must be admitted that when consciousness returns to the absolute, it brings with it all the memories it has accumulated through experience in reality. And of course, this is the idea of the Akashic records or morphic resonance, that we all have these, whether it be just from your own family or your race or the human race as a whole, we all have these evolutionarily informed morphic memories that exist as the interference patterns in your mind's eye exist when you create an image as these memories. And of course, then the theory is that they are stored in this Akashic record or this energetic memory field that anybody can draw from at any time. And indeed, this is sort of a function of your intuition. When you are connected to the Earth's resonance, you're also connected to the morphic memory field, and you can sort of download information intuitively that will give you insights into your present situation. The return of consciousness to the absolute does not imply an extinction of the separate entity which the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges with and participates in the universal consciousness and infinity of the absolute without losing the separate identity and accumulated self-knowledge which its memories confer upon it. What it does lose is the capability for generation of independent thought holograms, since that can be done only by energy in motion. In other words, it retains the power to perceive, but loses the power of will or choice. And again, that's what's so special about our experience right now. We have will, free will, and choice. In exchange, however, this consciousness participates in the all-knowing infinite continuum of consciousness, which is a characteristic of energy in the ever-present. Consequently, it is accurate to observe that when a person experiences the out-of-body state, he is, in fact, projecting that eternal spark of consciousness and memory which constitutes the ultimate source of his identity to let it play in and learn from dimensions, both inside and outside the time-space world in which his physical component currently enjoys a short period of reality. Gateway method. Having put the gateway experience in context by postulating a structural outline of how and why it seems to work, and having shown that what it is designed to achieve, the time has come to examine the specific techniques which comprise the gateway training process. These techniques are designed to enable the user of the gateway tapes to manipulate the high energy states which can be achieved if the user continues to work with the tapes over a period of time. The amount of the time required to reach advanced energy states and to fully exploit the techniques varies with the individual. The sensitivity of his nervous system, his general state of mind, and the extent to which he may have previously developed faculty in related techniques such as transcendental meditation are all pertinent factors affecting the speed at which he may expect to progress. The gateway process begins by teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an energy conversion box. Next, the participant is introduced to a method of, The gateway process begins by teaching the individual participant to isolate extraneous concerns in a visualization device called an energy conversion box. I think we all, that is drawing on how our minds are controlled, through the visualization process. You can, controlling our projections of the future through visualization. That's what the media is designed to do. So you see Robert Monroe knows this, and he's using this technique to, sort of like just get the participants to dump out all of the stuff that is going to hinder them in this process into this, interference pattern visualization of the mind's eye energy conversion box. Next, the participant is introduced to a method of encouraging his mind and body to strive to achieve a state of resonance through utterance of a single tone, a monotonous, protracted humming sound that sets up a feeling of vibration, particularly in the head. Now, again, this is meditation. I personally do not meditate. I don't do any of those structural practices. But you could argue that going out into nature in the woods or wherever you are and grounding and just being in a state of contemplation is a form of meditation. So I just don't practice personally any of these structural versions, like doing what this guy's doing, see, I can't even do it, but or anything like that, I'm not saying it doesn't work, because then there's the whole aspect of cymatics that ties into this, and how the sound wave vibrations can actually, of a certain character, can cohere actual physical matter, to use the language we're using in this video. And cymatics sort of speaks to the way that two human minds can cohere with each other if they're speaking to each other with the same energetic frequency. We don't have to meditate together, even though some people do that on the internet. They hold mass meditation centers They hold mass meditation sessions, and they find that certain points in time when they do this, like crime was totally decreased in a certain area where they were meditating for a whole month there, together. But I personally don't see the need for anything collective like that, because we're all doing it individually. And if we all do it individually and we all eventually reach the state of design that the quote-unquote absolute designed our bodies to achieve in resonance with the earth, we will all just know the self-evident truth. We will all resonate with that frequency, and we will all engage in actions and words that adhere to that frequency. So there's no need for any sort of collective, meditation that's going to quote unquote change the world. That will, any sort of organized campaign like that will always be countered by the control system. So it has to be something that's spontaneously happening with each individual person, in this man's humble opinion anyway. He engages in this resonant tuning, as it is called, by humming along with a chorus of such sounds that are contained on the gateway tape. Following this, the participant is exposed to the gateway affirmation, and this is encouraged to repeat it to himself as he hears it repeated on the tape. This affirmation is a statement to the effect that the individual realizes that he is more than merely a physical body, and that he deeply desires to expand his consciousness. And so you can see how this Hemi-Sync technique, and why the Army might have been studying it, you can see how it could be extended to society as a whole as a way to jam our tuning signal. You see, I have no doubt that that's taking place on some level. Jamming the tuning signal, especially for people that are in the cities, it's very hard to do to people that are living in the country. But, even then, you're still, these waves penetrate everything. So it's saturating the earth at this point. But you can definitely see why they would be studying this and how it could be used, even deeper than their own remote viewing astral projection teams that are, doing their thing, as it were. Okay, Hemi-Sync introduced. After that, he is exposed for the first time to the Hemi-Sync sound frequencies and is encouraged to focus on and develop a perception of and appreciation for those feelings which accompany the synchronization of brainwaves that results. Next comes the technique of progressive and systematic physical relaxation, while the Hemi-Sync frequencies are expanded to include additional forms of pink and white noise designed to put the physical body at the virtual threshold of sleep, as well as to calm the left hemisphere of the mind while raising the right hemisphere to a state of heightened attentiveness. And again, this is the same thing that the television does and all of their media in general. Once all of this is achieved, the participant is invited to envisage creation of an energy balloon comprised of an energy flow beginning at the center of the top of the head and extending down in all directions to the feet. The energy involved in this flow then proceeds up through the body and back out into the balloon pattern again. The energy balloon, which sets up a pattern very reminiscent of the cosmic egg discussed earlier, not only enhances bodily energy flow and encourages early achievement of a suitable resonant state, but it is also designed to provide protection against conscious entities possessing lower energy levels, which the participant might encounter in the event that he achieves an out-of-body state. That's interesting. It serves a precautionary purpose in the unlikely event that the participant's first out-of-body experience involves direct projection outside the terrestrial sphere. And this is where all the stories of like the interdimensional entities arise from, is people who have supposedly been in these realms and seen them, outside of those who would state that they've been abducted by UFOs or had some sort of experience with these quote-unquote aliens or whatever the case may be. Advanced techniques. Having reached focus 10, the participant is now ready to endeavor to achieve a state of sufficiently expanded awareness to begin actually interacting with dimensions beyond those associated with his experience of physical reality. This state is called Focus 12 and involves conscious efforts on his part while additional forms of pink and white noise enter the sound stream being directed into his ears from the gateway tape. Once the participant has achieved this state of greatly expanded awareness, he is ready to begin employing a series of specific techniques or tools, as the Monroe Institute characterizes them, which enable him to manipulate his newly found expanded awareness to obtain practical, useful feedback of value for promoting self-discovery and personal growth. The specific techniques involved are described individually below. Problem solving. This technique involves identifying fundamental problems which the individual wishes to see solved, filling his expanded awareness with his perception of these problems and then projecting them out into the universe. In this way, the individual enlists the assistance of what Monroe Institute calls his higher self. Well, there you go, right? That rhetoric is all over the internet and the New Age communities. In other words, his expanded consciousness to interact with the universal hologram to obtain the information required to solve the problem. This approach may be used to solve personal difficulties, technical problems in the realm of physics, mathematics, etc., practical administration problems, and so on. Responses to the problem-solving technique may be received almost immediately, but often they come based on developing intuition over the next 2 or 3 days. Frequently, the response comes in the form of a sudden holistic perception in which the individual suddenly finds that he simply knows the answer in all of its ramifications and completely in context, sometimes without even being able to put his newly found perception into words, at least initially. Now, this is so interesting because when you interact with nature, it does the same thing to your intuition, but without all this stuff. You don't need any of these techniques. You'll just have a flash of intuition, out of nowhere that will join all sorts of dots together and give you that aha moment, In some cases, the response may even arrive in the form of visual symbols, which the individual will see with his mind while he is in the Focus 12 state, and which he will have to interpret after he returns to normal consciousness. Patterning. This technique involves use of the consciousness to achieve desired objectives in the physical, emotional, or intellectual sphere. It involves concentration on the desired objective while in a Focus 12 state, extension of the individual's perception of that objective into the whole expanded consciousness, and its projection into the universe with the intention that the desired objective is already a matter of established achievement, which is destined to be realized within the time frame specified. This particular methodology is based on the belief that the thought patterns generated by our consciousness in a state of expanded awareness create holograms which represent the situation we desire to bring about, and in doing so, establish the basis for actual realization of that goal. So you see, this is the process that we could all use to change the world, as it were. Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established, in the universe, it becomes an aspect of reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. And this is the whole idea that is used to, make money for people about ascension, and everyone that talks about like a new earth splitting from this old earth, No, none of that is what it is. It's just your thought forms and thought pattern and the resonance of your heartbeat as it relates to the resonance of your entire body, and the way that your brain is vibrating with that frequency in conjunction with the resonance of the earth. When that process is taking place, you are just like filled with life and just you're amazed and everything is fantastic and that is the ascension, right? You're not going to just find yourself in another dimension. You're just operating on a different frequency. And sure, if you're operating that frequency right now, the majority of the population in the world is not operating at that frequency, but it is infective. And the more people that get there will, radiate out and permeate the collective energetic field of information, and that it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not some rapture event. This is something that might not even happen in our lifetimes. It'll have to spread through the morphic field maybe a couple generations, and that's the thing that we have working against us, is we have to deal with this jamming signal and all the stuff that's designed to prevent us from getting to this state of mind. And so time is working against us, because they are also working on their own agenda for the same generational period, right? So you just forget about Nibiru. Again, it's fine if you want to look into that. I've looked into everything. Okay, I'm not judging you if that's where you're at, right? But I'm saying eventually you reach a point in time where you're like, no, there's no planet out there, no second sun. Like, it's all in the mind, is my point. Okay. It's all in the mind, and this reality isn't going to split off from itself. You're not going to just one day wake up on a new Earth and all the other people are going to burn on the old Earth. No, that's just people selling you stuff to, fill their bank accounts with money, like they know the future, okay? Anyway. Where was I? Once the thought-generated hologram of the sought-after objective is established in the universe, it becomes an aspect of a reality which interacts with the universal hologram to bring about the desired objective, which might not, under other circumstances, ever occur. In other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space, as it applies to us if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. And again, that's what I just said. That's crazy. It's all about the intensity of, or the purity of the intent, right? Because that pure intent is sonically transmitted and cannot be denied. It is just bursting out in truth. It's like, but the problem a lot of us get into is that that energy can be hijacked if you're not careful, and it can turn into this self-destructive thing that destroys everything in its path, without compassion or empathy. However, the more complicated the objective sought and the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. This is wild. I literally just said that. I have not read this yet. Wow. Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. Wow, that's pretty crazy. And yet again, one of the many reasons why I don't even mess with any of this stuff, even though I have no doubt that I could achieve it if I really wanted to, because you can achieve anything that you put your mind to. All it requires is discipline. I'm hard on myself a lot, but I've achieved so many amazing things just through discipline, as far as what I put in my body, what I do with my free time, how I act. It's just it's patterning, right? It's seeing patterns is the most important thing. And then you can apply, once you see the patterns and the negative thought forms, you can counteract them with positive patterns, Color breathing. The next technique is called color breathing and is designed to use the expanded awareness and highly focused attentiveness associated with the Focus 12 state to imagine various colors in a particularly intense and vivid manner, so as to use them to resonate with and in turn to activate the body's own energies. Fundamentally, in terms of practical application, it is a healing technique which is designed to restore the body and to enhance its physical capabilities by balancing, revitalizing, and returning bodily energy flows. It is predicated on the principle that the body's electromagnetic field is capable of altering its resonance pattern so as to entrain energy from the Earth's electrostatic field for its own use. Again, this is back to the Schumann resonance and our connection with it. Or the way we are supposed to be connected with it, but again, we're being jammed by all these other signals. The various colors envisaged in the imagination as part of the technique cue the mind as to which frequencies and what specific amplitudes are desired in connection with this entrainment and the subsequent alterations in bodily energy flow patterns. And again, this is the visual aspect of the television entrainment process, the way they use red and blue all the time, the way they use the different shades of colors, the way they flash the screen and have really ADD'd the cut rate of all the the editing. It's just this assault. And of course, the colors are associated with emotion, so they're manipulating you both visually and emotionally, and then in training your brain energetically. So no wonder they were all into this in 1983. You know, this is just a response to Robert Monroe stuff, and using, you know, examining that. They've known this stuff for decades, like I said before. That color has the capacity to affect the human mind is well known, and the effectuality of color in certain kinds of healing is a demonstrable fact. For example, application of an intense blue light to an area of physical tumescence leads to a relatively rapid and easily observable reduction in the swelling, while red, and to a lesser extent yellow, have quite the opposite effect. However, in the Hemi-Sync application of the technique, external light sources are not involved, but rather the mind is the sole agent of healing and revitalization. Energy bar tool. Magic wands and enchanted scepters have been part of the folklore and occult practices of many cultures. The scepters, staves, and maces carried by monarchs, like the Hollywood, carried by monarchs and high priests alike, occur with such frequency in the history of bygone eras as to suggest that, at the very least, these items are aspects of some type of archetypical symbol which the human mind seems to appreciate, perhaps quite subliminally. Yeah, like everything else in our state of amnesia. In any case, the energy bar tool technique involves envisaging a small, intensely pulsating dot of light which the participant charges in his imagination with enormous energy until it is virtually pulsating. The participant then extrudes the dot into the shape of a sparkling, vibrating cylinder of energy, which he then uses to channel force from the universe to selected parts of his body for the purpose of healing and revitalization. Remote viewing. In addition, the energy bar tool is used as a portal for initiating a follow-on technique called remote viewing. In this context, the participant turns his bar of energy into a whirling vortex through which he sends his imagination in search of new and illuminating insights. The apparent purpose of the symbolism involved in the vortex seems to be to cue the subconscious and convey to it instructions as to what the participant wishes to do, but in terms of nonverbal symbols, which the right hemisphere of the mind is capable of understanding. Living body map. This technique provides amplification for application of the energy bar tool as a means of healing specific areas or systems of the human body. The configuration of the participant's body is imagined, and then the various major systems, such as the nervous and circulatory systems, are envisaged in appropriate colors within the confines of the outline being held in imagination. The energy bar tool is then applied to energizing, balancing, and healing in whatever manner the participant desires. In the process, the participant visualizes various streams of colored energy flowing out of the tool into the organ system or area upon which the revitalizing or healing application is being made. Since colors are the result of differing wavelengths of light, which is to say energy at various frequencies, this technique operates on the assumption that as the human body is composed of energy, it can be vitalized and healed through the additive application of additional energy, provided that the energy is applied in the appropriate form. Focus 15, travel into the past. All of the preceding techniques are conducted at the level of expanded awareness known as Focus 12. However, the technique of time travel into the past involves further expansion of consciousness through the inclusion of additional levels of sound on the Hemi-Sync tapes. Some of the sound is probably merely an intensification of the basic Hemi-Sync frequencies, being designed to further modify brainwave frequency and amplitude. Other aspects of the added sound patterns appear to be designed to provide subtle, almost subliminal suggestions to the mind as to what is desired by way of further expanded consciousness, so as to support the verbal suggestions and instructions also contained on the tape. Even the instructions are highly symbolic, with time being visualized as a huge wheel in the universe, with various spokes, each of which gives access to a different part of the participant's past. Focus 15 is a very advanced state and is extremely difficult to achieve. Probably less than 5% of all participants in any given gateway experience actually fully achieve the Focus 15 state during the course of the approximately 7 days of training. Nonetheless, Monroe Institute trainers affirm that with enough practice, eventually Focus 15 can be achieved. They also state that not only the individual's past history is available for examination by one who has achieved Focus 15, but other aspects of the past with which the individual himself has had no connection may also be accessed. Focus 21, the future. The last and most advanced of all the focus states associated with the Gateway training program involves movement outside of the boundaries of time-space, as in Focus 15, but with attention to discovering the future rather than the past. Now you see, and this is where all of the quote-unquote remote viewers, make their money, where they tell you, oh, well, I remember one of these remote viewing groups was saying that we can't see anything past 2012, before 2012 happened. And yeah, so there you go, right? Tread carefully into this area. The individual who has achieved this state has reached a truly advanced level. Except in unusual circumstances, it is probably not attainable except by those who have conditioned themselves through long application of meditation, or by those who have practiced long and hard through use of the Hemi-Sync tapes for a period of months, if not years. So, anybody could come out and claim that they remote viewed some future and claim that they're an expert in these techniques, but as this is saying, it's a very, 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 very small minority of people on the planet, or probably in world history, that would ever have been able to achieve something like this. And then of course, there's the issue of, like, if you remote viewed the actual future, does your observation of that have a change, produce a change in it? The out-of-body movement. This remarkable phenomenon has been saved for discussion in detail until last because of the interest which it occasions and special circumstances involved in its attainment. Monroe Institute stresses that the Gateway program was not established solely for the purpose of enabling participants to obtain the out-of-body state, nor does the program guarantee that most participants will succeed in doing it during the course of the training at the Institute. Only one tape out of the many which make up the Gateway experience is devoted to the techniques involved in the out-of-body movement. Basically, these techniques are merely designed to make it easier for the individual to achieve the out-of-body state when his brainwave pattern and personal energy levels have reached a point that he is in apparent harmony with his surrounding electromagnetic environment, such that he feels that he has reached the threshold where separation is a possibility. To facilitate achieving the out-of-body state, Bob Monroe, the founder of Monroe Institute, is quoted in a recent magazine article as saying that in order to assist the participant, the particular Hemi-Sync tape concerned with that technique employs beta signals of around 2877.3 CPS cycles per second. Since 30 to 40 CPS is considered to be the normal range for beta brainwave signals, those associated with the wakeful state, it is apparent that the Monroe Institute is convinced that the same heightened state of brainwave frequency output which promotes altered states of consciousness is also an important consideration in assisting in achieving of out-of-body states. The actual techniques employed for separating from the body involve such simple maneuvers as rolling out, lifting out after the fashion of a telephone pole, wherein the individual separates in a rigid, head-first manner, such that he finds himself standing at attention at the foot of his physical body, and sliding out through either end of his body. Role of REM or REM sleep. It is interesting to note that Bob Monroe informed the Gateway class that finished 7 May 1983 that an ex-trainer of his operating... Now, it's interesting that this lieutenant commander, I guess maybe that's how they do dates in the military, because it's not the American way to do dates. Anyway, that an ex-trainer of his operating in Charlottesville, Virginia, found that he could guarantee out-of-body movements by bringing participants down into a rapid eye movement state of sleep, and then use the Hemi-Sync tape technique. This may well be a function of the fact that most, if not all, people repeatedly go into an out-of-body state during REM sleep. REM sleep is the deepest possible level of ordinary sleep and involves complete disengagement of the body's motor cortex functions from the neck down and nearly complete suppression of consciousness in the left brain hemisphere. The effect of this is to put the body in a state of complete stillness so far as the skeletal muscle structure is concerned, thereby further promoting the state of deep rest needed to eliminate the bifurcation echo. In addition, it leaves the right hemisphere of the brain free to respond to the instructions and suggestions contained on the Gateway tape. However, use of the Hemi-Sync tapes at this point may be less a factor in actually achieving the out-of-body state than it is a matter of focusing the brain enough so that a residual memory of having naturally achieved an out-of-body state is carried into the waking state. Indeed, it may even be postulated that some dreams associated with deep levels of sleep are in fact functions of the same kind of altered consciousness involved in interaction with the universe that plays a role in all of the Focus 12, 15, and 21 states described above. The difference between those states and the condition of the mind in REM sleep seems to be that the left hemisphere is almost totally disengaged in the latter experience, such that memory of what was achieved in the altered states of consciousness cannot usually be retrieved by conscious desire because the left hemisphere has no knowledge of its existence or its locations in the right hemisphere. Admittedly, some people can be trained to remember their REM state dreams through intense conditioning in the waking state, but even that may be more a function of establishing pathways in the right hemisphere, which the left hemisphere can access following re-entry into the wakeful state, than it is an indication of any specific left hemisphere conscious involvement in the process during REM sleep. In any event, the three apparent conditions required for voluntarily inducing an out-of-body state in most individuals seem to be: 1, achievement of a state of profound quiet in the body such that the bifurcation echo fades and resonance at approximately 7 Hz is established. 2, synchronization of the two brain hemisphere wave patterns. And 3, subsequent stimulation of the right hemisphere of the mind to attain a state of heightened alertness, which of course interferes with brain hemisphere synchronization, but not until a sufficient level of enhanced frequency range has first been established to help achieve the out-of-body state. Information collection potential. Oh, here we go. This is the military application time now. The information acquisition potential associated with the out-of-body state seems to attract the most attention from the standpoint of developing practical applications for the gateway technique. Unfortunately, although the out-of-body state can apparently be achieved by many people without excessive expenditure of time or effort, the purposes to which it can be put are currently limited by the fact that although individuals in that state may travel anywhere on an instantaneous basis in either the terrestrial or in other spheres, information distortion in the former context remains a major concern. To date, according to one of the trainers at Monroe Institute, numerous experiments have been conducted involving persons moving from one coast to the other in the out-of-body state to read a series of 10 computer-generated numbers in a university laboratory. Although most have acquired enough of the digits to make clear that their consciousness was present, none have ever succeeded in getting all 10 correct. This seems to be a function of the fact that physical reality in the present is not the only holographic influence which the individual may encounter in an out-of-body state. There are also energy patterns left by people or events occurring at the same physical site being viewed, but from the past rather than the present. That's interesting. In addition, since thoughts are the product of energy patterns, and energy patterns are reality, it may also be possible that individuals encounter thought forms while in an out-of-body state which mingle with physical reality and are not easily differentiated. Now, there's a big clue if you are dealing with any sort of remote viewing interference in your life. That's a interesting thing to keep in the back of your mind. I'll read it again. In addition, since thoughts are the product of energy patterns, and energy patterns are reality, it may also be possible that individuals encounter thought forms while in an out-of-body state which mingle with physical reality and are not easily differentiated. Finally, as Melissa Yeager writes, there is another potential problem area in the sense that holograms can be viewed pseudoscopically, that is to say inside out or backwards, just as well as they can be seen in proper perspective. Some of the distortions occurring may ultimately prove to be traceable to this cause because in the out-of-body state, an individual may perceive the holographic energy patterns given off by people or things interacting in time-space reality in a somewhat distorted form. Belief system considerations. In 1967, Alexandra David Neal and Lama Yongden wrote a book entitled Secret Oral Teachings in Tibetan Buddhist Sects, from which the following quote is taken. "The tangible world is movement, say the masters, not a collection of moving objects, but movement itself. There are no objects in movement. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. They are nothing but movement. This movement is a continued and infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy. In Tibetan Sal or Shug, all objects perceptible to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect they may assume, are constituted by a rapid succession of instantaneous events." The classic description of the universal hologram is to be found in a Hindu sutra which says, "In the heaven of Indra there is said to be a network of pearls, Indra's net, yeah, so arranged that if you look at one, you see all the others reflected in it." So again, here you see the merger of science and religion, which is really not religion, it's the merger of the West and the East, right, together. And that just makes, that makes perfect sense why they would do that, because they're merging the past with the more present future, which was, Christianity wasn't even created until 2,000 years ago, as the official timeline goes, So of course there's not going to be the quote unquote ancient wisdom in the Bible in the same way that it's in all of the ancient Hindu or Buddhist texts. But don't get it twisted, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible. I have cited this quotation because it shows that the concept of the universe, which at least some physicists are now coming to accept, is identical in its essential aspects with the one known to the learned elite and selected civilizations and cultures of high attainment in the ancient world. Well, there you go. The concept of the cosmic egg, for example, is well known to scholars familiar with the ancient writings of the Eastern religions. There you go again. Nor are the theories presented in this paper at variance with the essential tenets of the Judeo-Christian stream of thought. The concept of visible reality, i.e. the created world, as being an emanation of an omnipotent and omniscient divinity who is completely unknowable in his primary state of being. The absolute at rest in infinity is a concept straight out of Hebrew mystical philosophy. Yeah, it's Ein Sof, right? Even the Christian concept of the Trinity shines through the description of the absolute as presented in this paper. The description of energy totally at rest in infinity fits with the Christian metaphysical concept of the Father, while the infinite self-consciousness resident in that energy providing the motive force of will to bring a portion of that energy into motion to create reality corresponds with the sun. This is so because in order to attain self-consciousness, the consciousness of the absolute must project a hologram of itself and then perceive it. That hologram is a mirror image of the absolute in infinity, still exists outside time and space, but is one step removed from the absolute and is the actual agent of all creation, all reality. And the eternal thought or concept of self, which resides from this self-consciousness, serves the, and then there is a redacted page apparently. What the hell? Oh man, the CIA redacted two things here just when they were getting into talking about the similarities between all these traditions. But of course, just because everything reinforces itself in all of these ancient traditions doesn't mean that it's accurate, Like, for example, people can say, well, only the elite people held that wisdom in these ancient societies, and that's even true all throughout history. That's why the secret societies were formed, to protect the religion from the swine. No pearls go to the swine. Well, look at the society that all of these secret societies and special sects of enlightened masters has produced. We're in a complete and utter enslavement right now, in this insane system. So, you can say that information is legit, but, the secret societies that possessed it created this ridiculous system by, of course, controlling society with that information. So, come on now. Let's have a little, I'm asking the people to have an open mind to the fact that a lot of the belief systems that they have, that they've learned, that they think is an awakening, might not be an awakening. That's all I want you to consider. I'm not trying to force anything on you, just consider that. Motivational aspect. It is a step-by-step procedure which involves repetitive practice of the techniques concerned, using each new insight as a means of penetrating further during the next practice session. But the rate of progress is so much faster with the gateway approach than it is with transcendental meditation or other forms of mental self-discipline, and its horizons seem to be so much wider that the discipline needed to practice it would seem to be within the means of even the impatient, result-oriented, skeptical pragmatists of our society. Unlike yoga and other forms of Eastern mental discipline, Gateway does not require the infinite patience and total personal subservience to and faith in a system of discipline designed to absorb all the individual's energies over most of a lifetime. Rather, it will begin to produce at least minimal results within a relatively short time, such that enough feedback is available to motivate and energize the individual to continue working with it. Indeed, the speed with which an individual may expect to progress seems less a function of the number of hours spent practicing than it is a question of the speed with which he or she is able to use the insights gained to release anxieties and stresses within both the mind and the body. These points of energy blockage seem to provide the principal barriers to achieving the enhanced energy states and focus of mind needed for rapid progression. The more compulsive, the more uptight the individual may be at the outset, the more barriers he or she will initially encounter to achieving a deep or immediate experience. But as the insights begin to come and the blockages begin to dissolve, the way ahead becomes increasingly clear, and the value of Gateway moves from the status of a matter of intellectual assessment to one of personal experience. So, conclusion. There is a sound, rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be plausible in terms of its essential objectives. Intuitional insights of not only personal but of a practical and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the gateway experience in an accelerated mode would seem to be required if the time needed to reach advanced states of altered consciousness is to be brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide exploitation of gateway's potential. So there it is, right? The military recommendation for how we can take advantage of this process, right? The most promising approach suggested in the foregoing study involves the following steps. Begin by using the gateway Hemi-Sync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focus and to induce hemisphere synchronization. Then add strong REM sleep frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. Provide hypnotic suggestion designed to enable an individual to induce deep auto-hypnotic state at will. Use auto-hypnotic suggestion to attain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation in rapidly progressing through Focus 12 exercises. Then repeat steps A and B following use of the auto-hypnotic suggestion that an out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. Repeat step E to achieve faculty in gaining out-of-body state under conscious control. Alter hypnotic suggestion to stress ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintain it even after REM sleep state ends. Approach Focus 15 and 21 objectives. Escape from time, space, and interact with new dimensions from the out-of-body perspective. So again, this is what programs like MK Ultra are about. That's the most famous one. Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff out there about how they were using, LSD and other sorts of drugs. But it's experiments like this, that they're doing with, the people that join the military that are, the fundamental basis of a lot of these secret government programs. Use multi-focus approach to solve problem of distortion in terrestrial information gathering trips. Of course, that would be their main concern, right? How do we remove the distortion to get accurate viewing at any point in time? This approach involves the use of 3 individuals in the out-of-body state. One viewing the target object here in time-space, one viewing it at focus 15 as it slips into the immediate past, and one viewing it at focus 21 as it slips from the immediate future. Holy shit! Can you imagine 3 of these psi agents viewing you from the 3 states, trying to, pinpoint your every move and thought? Just ridiculous. Debrief all 3 and compare data gathered from the 3 points of view. If care is taken to ensure that the 3 all go out of body together in the same environment, their consciousness energy systems should resonate in sympathetic oscillation. They can tune into the same target on different dimensions with greater effectiveness. Encourage pursuit of full self-knowledge by all individuals involved in the foregoing experiments to enhance objectivity in out-of-body observation and thinking, and to remove personal energy blockages likely to retard rapid progress. Be intellectually prepared to react to possible encounters with intelligent, non-corporeal energy forms when time-space boundaries are exceeded. Oh man. Arrange to have groups of people in Focus 12 state unite their altered consciousness to build holographic patterns around sensitive areas to repulse possible unwanted out-of-body presences. Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. I mean, you could imagine them using this program to they could interact, like in any of these staged events, they could interact with all of the people there in real time, and influence their actual perception of what took place, It's incredible. And this is 1983, man. We're like, what is it, almost 40 years since this was written? I mean, my God, who knows what they're up to, right? Encourage more advanced gateway participants to build holographic patterns of successful attainment and rapid progress for advanced colleagues to assist them in progressing through the gateway system. If these experiments are carried through, it is to be hoped that we will truly find a gateway to gateway and to the realm of practical application for the whole system of techniques which comprise it. So, and of course, practical application in the context of the military is never good for us. Oh man, that's just fucking crazy. What a crazy document. So yeah, I just had to, after skimming through this, I had to read it and just throw it out there. But my throat is so tired of talking right now. I'm just going to end it right now. Take care and be careful out there in the realms of the out of body experiences.